Okay, so we are going live now. Let's see, is it popping up yet? Here. Yep, just popped up. Okay, so we're going to give it a moment for everybody to kind of come in. All right, because this is a.
So where are we going live? YouTube
or? We are on 2 YouTube channels. We're on 2 Facebook channels.
Okay.
Nice. Yep. So we'll give it a few minutes for everyone to come in here and. You see it popped up there, right? So we're going to see ourselves there as well.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. Now, of course, the final product is going to be much clearer. Yep. So, okay. So, greetings, everyone who's joining us. We'll start in about 2 minutes here, just to give time for people to come in. And of course, I'm here with the world renowned Richard Smith. So we it's been a long time coming. So let's get it going here in a moment. Okay. Okay. Let's see.
Can they hear us now?
They can.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it's good to be here. This is my first time at the Meta Center. So this is an honor.
Yeah, we've been trying for some time. Of course, it's a relaxed session, right? You know, we have to be
right.
But we've been trying for some years now, and so you're finally here in the flesh.
Here.
Yes.
Everything happens for a reason. I think it's probably good that we're doing this after I got the trilogy completed. Yeah.
And of course, I'm going to show that on the screen as well as we get deeper into it. I just want to make sure I share this on another platform as well. Where's the here? Okay. Okay, so I'm not going to really worry about it too much for now. We're just going to get straight into it here. So first and foremost, greetings everyone. It's Tony Vortex. I'm here with the world-renowned, as I said before, Richard Smith. It's an honor to have him. He's here in the flesh at the Meta Center. So we are going to go into many different subjects. He's also known as the UFO teacher, and he can cover many different topics, of course, from aliens, UFOs, Freemasonry, ancient cultures, the kind of cabal and the situations that we see going on around us that try to remain hidden, and so on and so forth. So, of course, tomorrow at the center, we actually have the full lecture that will be taking place. So shout out to everyone who will be attending here directly. But for the meantime, and of course, as we're talking here, if there's any questions, comments that come up, you are welcome to let me know in the chat room, and I will ask Richard as we progress. So let's begin here with a starter. All right. Let's give him a little bit of an appetizer. Okay. So you call yourself the UFO teacher for decades now. When did you first decide that was your mission in life?
Oh, my first awakening came at the age of 21. And in that first awakening, there was a whole bunch of memories that came back with earlier on. You would think they were just dreams, but these all came flooding back like memories. And at that point is when this entity or being I refer to in the book as the crone made herself known to me, being this praying mantis type extraterrestrial. And then my first reaction to it was, oh, and it was a shocking response to me. But in seeing her, my first thing was, I know you. But how do I know you? Because it wasn't registering like, okay, these are the memories. You were there somehow. And it turned out that began what I referred to as the conversation over many years, in which case she was always that obscure figure in the backdrop of my experiences as a child, teenager, leading up to that time of turning 21. In that initial conversation, it was realized that the reason she had always been there is because this is part of my family. I'm a multi-generational experiencer. So my mother was a part of it, my grandmother. Turns out, my brother is part of it. My nieces have had experiences that make it clear they're a part of it now too. So she knew at the Crone, she knew I was getting ready to go back to college again because I had already finished up getting a degree for graphic design. I wanted to go back for my bachelor's. And it just so happened to be that the teachers at my graphic design college had said, well, the original ideas for graphic design and commercial art come from fine art. So that's when I decided to go back and focus on the visual arts. Well, the Crone was aware of that. She had come to me and said, would you use your talents and skills to take this downloaded information and turn it into artistic representation that educates the masses on what's going on with this phenomenon? I said, yes, let's do it. Because there was something familiar in her asking me that, because of the long-standing relationship that had been there that had finally come to light at the age of 21. And then it went from there. The term UFO teacher came about more so at the end of doing that first series of work, which I refer to as an experiment in humanity. And people can see that on the website at ufoteacher.com. But the opening reception at the solo exhibition I was doing, putting on a display of all my work, including a final installation piece, senior exhibit, I had everything there in sequence. At that opening reception, there were people from the news media who showed up. And there was also this group of Japanese businessmen, who I think there was like 4 or 5 of them, who were there. I just got the feeling they were Japanese. I'm not sure if that's really what their background was, but they were examining each piece of artwork at the same time that a member from the news media was asking me about a piece of my artwork. And while I am talking to that reporter, one of the Japanese businessmen turned around, pointed at me and said, "You are the UFO teacher." And that stuck. And the news media heard that, and that's how that happened. So a year had gone by, and they decided, that was December of 95. By the time 1996 came along, I decided, you know what? That's going to be my official website, my official brand, everything. So that's how it came into existence, was from that opening reception at the art gallery.
So you have here, of course, this comes from the many books that you have. And so your professors encouraged you to explore controversial subjects through art. Did any of them actually believe, as far as you believe in your extraterrestrial theories, or were they just supportive of your artistic expression?
So, yeah. You probably would have loved to have been a fly on the wall when I had to take this idea to these professors who were well-known national and international artists in their own right, established. And so many of them, several of them were more on the, intellectual side of things. So here I am coming to them saying, this is what I want to devote my tutorials to. This is what I want to devote my senior exhibition to. And you could have heard a pin drop when I just started describing what I wanted to do for that first body of artwork. Each one of us in that curriculum had to have a mentor of our own to watch over us as we progressed. That mentor for me was Luis Kamnitzer. He was one of the lead professors there. And I think it was a good thing that I had him. He called me into his office and said, look, he says, I'll let you do this. He says, I can see where you're going with it in terms of society, culture, politics, economics. He says, I see what you're driving at. He says, we'll do this. He says, but one stipulation. He says, I don't want to see any airy-fairy garbage in there. He says, if you're going to do this, it better be something that the viewer can relate to and take away with them. Because he himself as an artist was very politically motivated with the stuff he did as installation work. So I could see where he was coming from. I said, no problem. No airy-fairy stuff, okay? Not an issue, because I wanted to get away from that anyway and do something different and unique. And his mandate was, you should strive to make every piece you do something that interacts with the viewer to the point where they're not just looking at it, but they're walking away with it when they turn away. Mm-hmm. And I think I succeeded in a lot of ways with most of the pieces I did, pulling the viewer in, making them feel like they're walking into that window frame of the artwork, okay? Mm-hmm. And that it's actually interacting with them on an emotional and psychological level as an experience, not just a narrative, and definitely not an illustration. So that's where that went. And then to answer your other side of that question, he made it very clear he didn't believe any of it.
Mm. Okay.
He says, I will stand by you 100%. I will back you up. But he says, I don't believe any of this garbage. So I was like, okay. And which was a good thing, because by the time I got to the second tutorial while I was there, second grouping, there was a piece I did called Becoming, which is an image of one of the extraterrestrial beings who I had referred to as progenitors, okay, hovering over all of these religious symbols that are descending down to Earth at the same time. And you could see where what I was portraying in that, what I was driving at. A couple of the other professors who viewed that tutorial, they got bent out of shape, and it turned into an argument between them and the professor who was my mentor. And he defended me all the way. He says, he has the right to do this. He's not saying you have to believe it. Mm-hmm. He says, yeah, but he's putting this out there that might offend other people's sensibilities. He says, well, isn't that what we're doing here? Isn't that supposed to be what we're doing as artists, is making people see things from a different perspective? It just so happened to be that what I was doing was territory that nobody bothered to explore at that point. Mm-hmm. So it actually even put those professors in the hot seat to test out what their boundaries were on things.
Okay, so now I'm about to go a bit deeper.
Okay.
Ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
All right. So
ready.
Okay, so your book series. Okay, so it spans over a decade. Yeah, okay. Yeah. What motivated you to write about the connections between Moorish history, Freemasonry, okay, and this alien contact?
So That's a good question to bring up. And it gets asked a lot. So it's a good thing to talk about as a foundation. I suppose the best way to answer that is, where does the title come from? The Moor, the Mason, and the Alien. Why that? Well, one part of the answer to your question is that over time you start to realize everything that's been happening on this planet or this solar system, from primordial history to the present, comes down to those three main pillars. We have the Moorish legacy, which represents the esoteric concept of flesh and bone, which are those star nations or extraterrestrial factions who have a vested interest in the human condition and our relationship to the ecology of this planet, the liberation and emancipation of true knowledge. Okay, this is everything that the Moorish legacy has always been. It has represented that side of humanity that was worth paying attention to, above and beyond all the bad stuff. Then you have the second pillar, which is the Masonic agenda, which is relates to what trickled down to our planet here from the empires that had a vested interest in the other side of that esoteric concept, which is wood and stone, which is a vested interest in the tradable commodities and the real estate that we as slaves live on. No investment in the human condition. In fact, if anything, if that human condition gets in the way, it's going to be targeted and eliminated, because we are just a number that can be replaced like cheap slaves. So there's that side of it. And if they can't have it, okay, let's burn everything down. Then there's that third side backing those two, that dubious two-part element, the alien aspect of it, which breaks off into two things: the flesh and bone, wood and stone. So for flesh and bone, Moorish legacy, you have what's called extraterrestrial intervention. And for wood and stone, Masonic agenda, we have the other side, which is called the alien abduction phenomena. These two are not the same thing, even though people will confuse them. Okay, extraterrestrial intervention is our starborn legacy on this planet, which came down and manifested in the form of the Moorish legacy on this planet. We may only know an abbreviated 800-year history of the Moors coming up into Europe, but when you look what they did in Europe, you're like, okay, where did they get that from? Because they were well ahead of their time. And if it wasn't for the Moorish legacy, there'd be no Renaissance, for sure. There just wouldn't have been. If there was no, and from where the Moors come from, the ancient Commission mysteries, what the Grecian people mistakenly mispronounced as Egypt in their own language, because of that envy they had of Egypt, and labeling them as the people of secrets, which the term is gut, secret code, and that became a gut joy, which then became mispronounced as Egyptian, okay, along the way. And that's where that word came from, because they couldn't stand the fact that the Commission mysteries were cut off from them, because they were a little too ignorant and barbaric to actually understand it the right way. Why? Because the Grecian Empire was on the wrong side of the equation. And the Commission mysteries and those masters looked at the Greeks like, yeah, we can't really teach them anything. They're not going to get it. So this is extraterrestrial intervention coming down through the various bloodlines on this planet, the Christ energy, the real power, the Moorish legacy. And then you have the other side, the alien abduction phenomena, which is more about, I don't know how far I should go with this, but it's more about putting people who can be controlled on a false pedestal of privilege and self-entitlement to control everybody else and keep them under control. Basically, turning a certain demographic segment of society into the gatekeepers to manipulate, put down, and destroy everything else, because the real power, the Christ energy, the Moorish legacy, represents something that they can't target directly because it's too powerful, but they can target indirectly through psychological warfare and social and cultural discrimination. So
almost what you're describing here is like all the wars we see, all the conflict we're seeing is really the obvious of a hidden agenda or war taking place behind the scenes. And this is like the forefront. This is like the little crumbs we're seeing come to the forefront of things that are going on in the background.
Yeah, it all centers around the value of the human being, because we have something that they don't have. And when I say they, I'm talking about those who are proponents of the alien abduction phenomena, as opposed to those who represent the benevolent factions of extraterrestrial intervention, for which we get the Temple of Solomon, which gave birth to the Vril power and the Christ energy through the construction of that temple, which is the body. In fact, the old world term for Vril was Alkim. Of course, that's the root for Alkemet, Alkim, the power of the mind to move mountains. And that's what became Vril, which then became mispronounced as will. So Vril power becomes known as willpower.
Let's go deeper. Okay, so, all right. You mentioned receiving a telepathic download in 1994 that included a glyph. Can you describe that experience?
Oh, yes. The crone had shown that to me and basically gave it to me. She says, "This is actually yours." She says, "In time you realize it's part of it's your like I in that conversation I would explain it as she meant this is your family crest. This it represents your family bloodline." And she says it's always been yours and you should be aware of it. So she said basically I'm giving this to you, back to you in a sense. Because you haven't been aware of it just yet. And over time, I realized what the symbol meant. It meant progeny, peace, and prosperity. So that became, I originally did a marker rendering of it, which I still have saved. Thought it was pretty cool at the time. Now I look at it all these years later, like, yeah, that was pretty primitive. But I went and redid it from scratch to clean it up and used it on the 25th anniversary of Legions of Light, Armies of Darkness, which is the prelude to the trilogy. And so I put out that special edition of it to update it and put that on the cover to represent where things began. That initial journey into awareness that brought me to the more than Mason and the alien.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so now, all right. So of course, so you described of course, a conflict between what you call flesh and bone, all right, versus wood and stone.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, people could kind of get the hint that this is, let's say, people of color versus pale-skinned people. Are you promoting a form of racial extensionism that could be harmful?
No, because the fact that I exist pretty much negates that.
Okay. It's pretty obvious, right?
Yeah,
Right. Uh-huh.
I get that question. I think, although it's posed differently at one particular time, a member from the audience looked at me and said, you do know you're white. I said, yeah, that's the point. Get it?
Right.
So, I mean, and then I point out, look, there's two factors here. One, who are you going to listen to?
Mm-hmm.
And two, do you think I always look like this? The power of reincarnation plays a key role in civil rights, spiritual sovereignty, emancipation of the soul, cosmic awareness, knowledge. Okay, so we have spent so much time killing off people who are darker than me because they were talking about something that was dangerous to essentially the establishment of and of course that's just code for white America.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
In the 60s, they called it the establishment. But I would peel that away and say, let's just call it what it is, white America. And so Mother Earth got hip to that. And she said, well, okay, you're going to keep killing off my dark-skinned children. I'll send a weapon that you can't go up against. I'll send someone who has the same face of the problem. And then what are you going to do then? Because one thing I've always said is there's a lot of people like me out there. And all I have to do is start talking, and they'll come out of the woodwork, and they won't be afraid to also talk about this. And if you're the kind of person who is getting insulted because of some spineless thing like white fragility, then maybe you are the problem, or you're not paying attention to what I'm really saying. You have a choice there. Are you part of the solution, or are you part of the problem? Are you getting upset over what I'm saying or insulted because you're not really paying attention to what I'm saying, and that what I'm saying may not have anything to do with you, so then why are you getting upset? Or are you getting upset because you are part of the problem and I'm confronting it and throwing it in your face because you think this particular UFO conference was a cheap form of escapism? And if that was the case, you came to the wrong lecture, because I'll use everything you thought you could run away from in the what has been perceived too long as the white man's land of alien contact and UFOs, and I'm going to throw it right back in your face and show you that the God you worship at Sunday Mass is the same one you were chasing in the form of the UFO of Saturday night. And if you can't accept that, then maybe you are part of the problem. But no, it's not anything to do with racial division, except for those who have an agenda who would skew it in that direction. And of course, the political climate we're in today would skew it that way.
Oh yeah. And I remember many years ago, decades ago, when I came across you, and I heard this Moorish, and like this white guy talking about this. You gonna say that was very odd at that point in time. I'm like, okay, but then I'm going listening, and of course you're going deep into different subjects that you can say were a little bit forbidden, especially at that time. So, okay, so let's kind of. I wrote a lot of questions here. So I'm going to give the audience here some things here. So, going slightly off of the direct alien content information here, you have made some serious accusations, say for example, against pharmaceutical companies, saying that they deliberately create customers rather than cures.
Yes.
Why do you make those claims?
It has been well established over time that if there is something that comes about that represents a true cure, it will be squashed, or it will be assimilated into the high priesthood of big pharma and then turned into some kind of chemical warfare. In ancient history, and this is where it starts, big pharma does not exist in a vacuum. It is an escalation of something that started eons ago, flesh and bone versus wood and stone. The original high priesthood of the Commission Mysteries was known as the Ammon, Ammon, which is a extension of the word Solomon. Okay, Solomon, Ammon. And whether the vowels are interchangeable, so don't get hung up on that. But what does happen is that you have this infiltration take place, which then trickled down later on to the whole Illuminati Masonic gift of infiltration, because they learned it from their ancient counterparts, which I describe in the book as the Shetu regime. And of course, some people might ask, well, who are they? Well, you've seen them portrayed in the news media and UFO experiences as the Greys. And I'm very particular in the book as to how I describe them, because there's a lot of xenotypes out there that look similar to that have nothing to do with what I'm talking about. And I don't want that to cast aspersions on other people's experiences with genuine flesh and bone creatures that have a benevolent intent. So, but what I call what's called the Greys today is actually the Shetty regime of the ancient world. They were very much the Gestapo. Okay. And they saw that the Phoenician mysteries, the high priesthood, the Amon, that was a threat to their sense of control. So they go and target the high priesthood and infiltrate it. This is when you have that change. Because nowadays you really don't hear that many people referring to it as the Amon. Now they call it the Amun Ra. Because when the Shetty regime moved in for the kill, they took over, assimilated it, infiltrated it, and that's when it became the Amun Ra. Amen, A-M-E-N -R-A. It's the Amen, but then they attached the word Ra to it because that was the sun god. Why? Because they wanted to put themselves in the position of looking like all powerful. And what is it that powers the throne of power, which is Earth? The sun. So you attach the two together, it makes them look like not only are they in control of the throne of power, but they are also in control of what powers the throne. That's a real estate reference right there, first and foremost. Well, over time, they diversify because you can't walk around calling yourself the high priesthood of the Amun Ra. That's going to be pretty obvious at some point. People will start asking, quote unquote, the wrong questions. So they split into two things. One was what eventually came to be known as Vatican City, to control the mind via political propaganda. And the other was Big Pharma, the new high priesthood, to control the body, poison the body, toxify the body, and then also poison the mind. When you fill the mind with a bunch of garbage, and then you fill the body with a bunch of toxicity, you have effectively targeted the Temple of Solomon in an all-out agenda to target the root of the Temple of Solomon, the root of the body, which is the gene of passion, aka the passion of the Christ. Well, they could never get to that. That was ultimately a threat to them. They could never get to it because it's not a physical chunk of real estate that you can manipulate. So they figured, well, let's just slash and burn and canvas the whole thing and target the whole body, and in the hopes of destroying that gene for passion, destroying that legacy, that starborn legacy. And so Big Pharma today is just an evolution of the ancient high priesthood, and so is Vatican City. These are Vatican City became a shell corporation that they could hide themselves inside. It's still the Amun Ra. And you want to test that out, you might want to take a look at what you say at the end of the Our Father and the Hail Mary. Amen. Well, where do you think the word Amen came from? It came from the ancient world of the Shetty regime and the bad, corrupt high priesthood, Amun Ra. Well, I describe them in the book as these supercomputer cybernetic organisms that were walking on two legs. So when you add, yeah, I was going to say the wrong thing. I'm just trying to find the right way of explaining this. When you, as a Christian, or even more specifically a Roman Catholic, are saying your Our Fathers and your Hail Marys, and you're saying Amen at the end, you're worshiping the grace. And that's the thing that totally lights the fire under that evangelical Roman Catholic Southern Baptist mentality of, how dare you say that? I will burn you at the stake. Say, well, you can try your best, but this is the truth. You're worshiping the grace because the Vatican City is their shell corporation. So this is why, and then Big Pharma becomes the other side of it, targeting the Temple of Solomon. Temple being that ancient esoteric word meaning body, because the human body is the Temple of Solomon. It's just a manifestation of that spiritual concept. So that's why I say that Big Pharma is there to poison the body. Look at what, I mean, seriously, on that side of it, look at what they've done with cannabis. Once cannabis started coming to light again as something really good, and people started being educated the right way and moving away from that delinquent term marijuana, then, which was itself political propaganda. It wasn't even a real term. It was borrowed from a Mexican term because they knew people in white America were too dumb to realize it was just a Mexican term. So even the term marijuana was a slur. But once people started getting back on board over the past 15 years, 10 years with cannabis, okay, and hemp, well, what does Big Pharma do? They start manufacturing their own chemical, their own, it's like their own version on steroids, which then ruins the whole thing because it's supposed to have a natural effect on the human body. So what's in cannabis ties into what's in our body. And what's in our body ties in with cannabis, and it does a lot to awaken the temple of Solomon. So this is another aspect of it as well. Back in the day in the 70s, and this is something I've often talked about as a huge proponent to health and wellness, there was this whole war going on over vitamin B17 or amygdalin laetrile being able to kill off cancer. Okay, well, that set off a war with the FDA sending in their own armed agents, wherever they got these armed agents from. I didn't know the FDA was allowed to be armed, but they were going into these health food stores in the 70s, and they were just totally wrecking that whole health food store. You could not put apricot seeds right next to the needles or the ampules needed to put it in your body for advanced treatment. You had to have the needles down one end of the aisle, the ampules over here, and the apricot seeds over there. So someone who didn't know any better would walk in the store and not have any clue what to do. Okay, so, or they just made it illegal for that particular store to have any of those items. Nowadays, we're getting back into it and realizing, oh, right alongside cannabis, now we're back into talking about colloidal silver and apricot seeds and amygdalin laetrile and realizing, okay, when you do it the right way, it was never bad in the first place. And if amygdalin laetrile is so bad, then why are we allowed to eat apples, which have a high content in it too? Not as much as apricot seeds, but high enough for them to promote the idea back in the 70s. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. But then they realized, oh, well, if they eat the seeds, they'll beat cancer, and that'll destroy oncology, which likes to poison the body with big pharma. Damn, we've backed ourselves into a corner. Okay, let's just tell all the kids in school, don't eat the seeds, it's poisonous. Well, since when does Mother Nature have that kind of schizo mentality where she produces a fruit where if you eat the fruit, it's okay, but if you eat the seeds by accident, you're dead? Who does that? Mother Earth doesn't do that, but Big Pharma, puts that out there. Apple a day keeps the doctor going. Don't eat the seeds; they'll kill you. What? Who? Where? Where do you find that kind of fruit on the planet? You don't. Everything about it is healthy. I eat the whole apple core. You eat the seeds in it, and you don't even taste it when you eat it with the fruit. Because some people are like, "Oh, gross." You don't taste it if you eat it with the fruit, and you just chew the seeds up in the fruit. It makes no difference. You don't even notice it.
So, you're going deep. You most definitely have some comments here. One person said that if you're going this deep just in this little interview, they can only wonder what's going to be talked about tomorrow. And he's going deep tomorrow. But so continuing on here, this is going back to Hurricane Katrina. Right. So many of you who are listening know about Hurricane Katrina, New Orleans, Louisiana, what happened some years ago. So you suggested that when it comes to Hurricane Katrina, it was weather warfare targeting Moors, and that 9/11 was connected to Masonic power struggles.
Yes.
Those are extraordinary claims, you can say, right? So what would you have to say to anyone who would doubt those statements?
I would say, I get it. I understand why you doubt it. If you're not into it as long as I've been to see the writing on the wall, it's going to be hard to spot that cold turkey. Okay, so I would give them a couple of bullet points to think about, and then let them go the wrong way. And those bullet points would be simply this. The Moors in the ancient world, sun-kissed people of color and hue, Commission mysteries, and there's also the term the cat people. Bast was a big component of the Egyptian hierarchy there. And even in that history, you'll see there are people referred to as the mouse, which is also a reference to the cat. So there's this cat energy there. Well, if you look at in the way Malcolm X did, and you start looking at the words in the dictionary, you realize how that word cat has been manipulated to be a bad thing through propaganda. Not that this, I mean, there's nothing wrong with using these words intelligently, but you have catatonia, you have catastrophe, okay? And many of the words, you just look up any word starting with CAT in the dictionary, you'll see a whole litany of them that mean oblivion, bad things, horror, epidemic, you know. And this is a subversive way of referring to the Moorish people as the same way you see black and white defined in the dictionary. White is defined as purity. Black is defined as dark, sinister, evil. Okay, well, first of all, that's even untrue, because whatever is white is completely devoid of color and therefore dead, and is not pure, and certainly not in our history. When you look at what has come out of Europe all these centuries and pilfered over into white America, and what is black is where all the color of the rainbows go. Okay, that's your melanin in your skin. That's your psychic power. That's your Christ energy, your real power, the female principle, the feminine goddess energy. So black was never bad. White was never all that good. And we've been taught the opposite. And it came out in other words, starting with the word cat. And the whole slander of that was done in a long term subversively as a slander towards the Moorish legacy in the ancient sense into today. So then and once again, do not get hung up on C versus K, because if you look at words throughout history, you'll see they started with K first and would change to C later on. Like the Canis Empire, that empire, the Interstellar Empire. Well, Canis, K, gave birth to the word canine, which we spell with the C. Okay, Christ is spelled K-R-S-T, or if you want to throw a vowel in, K-R-I-S-T. Later on, we botched it up by spelling it with C-H. So once again, there's that relationship between K and C. In Hurricane Katrina, that was about destroying the people with their legacy there, their heritage, their culture, to force them out of the way so that real estate investors could move in and take over and turn it into what? Waterfront property, whatever they were going to do with it. But they wanted to get the Moorish community and anyone who was in the extended community of the family of man, the sun-kissed people of color and hue, out of the way so that the investors could move in and take over. Well, what better way to really stick it to them than to send a storm front or a storm formation that starts with the word cat, Katrina, okay, like catastrophe, catatonia, and carnage, just starting all sorts of carnage like that. This gets emphasized with an exclamation point that I found out after the whole fiasco with Katrina, in that there was a person there who, strangely enough, he was into real estate. He had his own houses and that he would flip and fix up and sell to raise money, because his ultimate goal with that money was to build a Moorish school for children. This is a story you never hear about. And wouldn't you know it, he actually makes that dream come true. He gets that school built. And then Hurricane Katrina comes along and destroys the school. So there's those things that once you start looking at the details, you're like, yeah, okay. So say what you want about the offense and what's about where the warfare, but in this one instance, when you start adding the pieces up, you realize, okay, this ancient Moorish legacy of New Orleans was being taken out of the way to make room for investors who had a much different agenda. Once again, flesh and bone versus what you saw. So this carries up, and mind you, this is all with the Bush administration. And the Bush family always seemed to have a hard time with hurricanes. Papa Bush never handled Hurricane Andrew the right way. Baby Bush never handled Hurricane Katrina the right way. Okay, so it's like there was this whole delayed reaction. And with Katrina, you could see how these other darker elements were telling the sun, hold back, let the disaster take place, let all chaos break out, and then act like you're going to do something. By then it was too late because everything was destroyed. Any sense of law enforcement had already skipped out and disappeared because a lot of the law enforcement there were younger men who had families. They had no vested interest in staying or loyalty. Their first thing was, screw it, I got to go take care of my family. So there was nobody there watching the police precinct. Well, in a state of chaos, if you're a victim of the flooding and the chaos, and you want to do something to defend your own family, what are you going to do? You're going to raid the police station and take all the guns. Well, when the cops came back, there were no guns in the precinct to defend anything because the guns had all been taken by people who, raided it for their own reasons of being scared about what's going on. So it just turned into a complete mess there, and that was done on purpose. That was the calculated response that was needed or wanted at that point. So then in that same administration, since he got to be in office for 8 years, then you have the other end of that equation is the World Trade Center disaster. And that was a battle between what I explained in the books as upper management versus middle management. And that was nothing new to that situation. The concept of upper management and middle management came from the cosmos, from the empires. They established that attitude. And that trickled down through the Shetty regime onto this planet, in which case a new form of upper management and middle management was created, which eventually evolved into friction in that scenario that left middle management, whether you want to see it as George W. Bush and the radicalized idiots that surrounded him, or the ones behind the scenes that were controlling it, they got scared over the idea that they couldn't stay in power and upper management wasn't going to help them. Well, upper management's Western center of power and Western political arm was the World Trade Center. So middle management got bent out of shape and decided to want to take over and pretend that they were going to be upper management. So they were going to send a message to upper management. Well, upper management's like, okay, you want to play that game? We're going to step on you now. And one by one, you look at how the sequence played out after that. He lost all of his minions around him. One by one, they were knocked off, taken away, discredited, fired, resigned, to the point where he was left as a lame duck all by himself. And this is the thing that his father, Papa Bush, tried to warn him. He says, I told you not to associate with these people. And at a time when things were getting pretty bad for the son's administration, that's when his father came in and had that meeting with him, which was, advertised all over the media. Why is his father coming to the White House? What are they going to talk about? Well, that's what they spoke about. They spoke about how he was screwing up. He was associating with the wrong people. You got to get away from that radical element. I told you not to surround yourself with those nut jobs. He says, why do you think during my administration in the late 80s, I kept all those nut jobs at an arm's length? You go and let them all in, and now look what happened. Now you can't handle it, and it's out of control. Well, that's exactly what happened. They thought they could take on upper management, and lost their place. And they got taught a serious lesson. It doesn't matter who you look at around them. Even at the time, Colin Powell, he woke up and realized this is a losing battle. I'm jumping ship and going to the other side. Which by the time Obama was running for White House, he switched gears, jumped to the other side. He says, I'm in with Obama. Screw the rest of you. So even that part of it was an extension of that. And so when after the World Trade Center came down, all of a sudden things went quiet. Because then everybody's like, oh, okay, we learned our lesson. And you see this happening in history. This is not the first time it's happened. It's a repetition, a ripple effect of people who do not learn from history. You can't just pin it at the doorstep of the stupidity of that one administration, because at an earlier time in history, there was such a thing as 1930s Germany, and that was middle management as well. Nazi Germany was middle management, and they thought they could be upper management and go after that Masonic element, go after the Blitzkrieg of England, and then going after Poland and going after France. Well, there's a cardinal rule there. If you want to take over, you don't go bombing other white countries. You want to bomb North Africa like he was doing and taking that over, fine. Nobody ever would have touched him as the Führer. But once he started focusing his attention on Poland, Austria, France, England, Russia, well, at that point, upper management was like, you know what? This administration's out of control. We need a new form of middle management. And one by one, look what happened to Hitler. He lost all of his lieutenants around him. They all turned against him. They all jumped ship until he was finally absolutely alone, just like George W. Bush. These are classic examples of middle management thinking that they can take on upper management because they get power hungry, they get greedy, and they don't want to take orders from upper management, and they lose focus on where their place is in the pecking order.
Okay. So what we're going to do is, of course, obviously this is a deep subject. You have 3 dense books about all of this and then some, right?
No.
Okay, so, and I'm going to show the books here in a moment. And I suggest that for those who are listening now and who will listen later, that you should pick up these books if you want further details about any of the subjects that we are going into. Because tomorrow, of course, you'll be getting into these things plus much, much more. Okay, so let's end on this one for today. You mentioned hybrid children, okay, and a daughter you call J.M. Starchild. Are you saying these are actual offspring from alien encounters, or is this more of a metaphysical, metaphorical language?
No, that's the real thing, physical thing, that interaction between the benevolent factions and the human counterparts. And it's not at all the same thing as the alien abduction phenomena, because that's all about trying to reverse engineer themselves into the human condition so that they can go back to their masters and say, we're part of this planet now, we're going to take over. That's got nothing to do with that. The hybrid thing, which actually turned into a hybrid war because of jealousy by the other side. These are children that are known as the in-between. They're neither human nor alien. They're something else unto themselves because of that combination. And it is part of, or an extension of, the human experiment to try and understand what's going on with us, understand our culture better. Can we assimilate into their culture? But it's also a program that says, well, this is our backup plan. If you guys decide to not listen to us and blow yourselves to smithereens, now we have a select group we can take to another planet and start over with another Eden, another Earth, and begin again. So there's also that seeding factor there of having a backup plan while all their efforts are invested in making sure we don't destroy ourselves here. It's not a careless decision. It's a carefully planned out decision and looking at all variables. Obviously, if you are advocate of, let's say, the multiverse, alternate realities, parallel dimensions. Some of these entities have the ability to look at that and realize, well, okay, this is how that Earth destroyed itself. We don't want that happening in this reality. Okay, so they have a comparison to go by. Doesn't necessarily mean they're using time travel. They're just looking through another window, breaking through that barrier, and looking at these other possibilities. And recently, I just picked up on a new term that actually describes that. It's called transurfing, which gives you the ability to manifest the reality you want, pulling it in from the alternative flow of another existing reality and merging it with yours to make it true, make it solid through the power of thought energy and the power of intention that you put out there. And that's part of that hybrid program too, that intention to put it out there like, we want you guys to succeed, but here's the backup plan. And we'll let you, as, let's say, human mothers and human fathers, we'll let you see these children. We may even let one stay and we'll take the other one, because there seems to be this emphasis on twins. Okay, one that's maybe a little bit more human, a lot more human, and one obviously not so human at all, more on the other side of the equation, but still has human features to some extent. So there's that sociological experiment too. What happens if we have two twins, but we put one here and we take the other? What happens to those twins? And we've seen through history psychological and sociological experiments with twins anyway. So it is not unheard of. It's not foreign. These extraterrestrial beings are just following through on things that we've been doing already since the 60s, looking at the phenomena of twins, identical or fraternal. And so it's a valid part of the human experiment on this planet, to see what makes us tick, while also looking to see if we can also exist in their environment too and understand their culture. So it's a back and forth give and take experiment. That's what the hybrid program is. My daughter is one such individual. She's all grown up now. She's strangely enough talking about children. I mean, she's following her legacy. She actually works in the NICU unit with preemies who are close to death, and her job is to keep them alive and make them come to full fruition so that they can have a healthy life. And there's some pretty awful situations that she has to deal with in terms of helping them, because they were born so prematurely. And it just strikes me that, yeah, she's doing the same thing that the extraterrestrial beings are doing too with us. So it must be something that's hardwired into her as a twin, because her sister was taken, and my wife Linda was allowed to see that other twin a couple times, but never allowed to be with her for long periods of time. So there was a time when my wife Linda wasn't really quite sure how she got pregnant the last time around with that third child, her daughter. And then she found out that they were supposed to be twins. Well, then the question is, where's the other one? Where'd it go? And in her experiences, she found out what happened to the other one. They showed her. Here's your other daughter. You can have this one. We're going to take this one, but we'll let you see her from time to time.
Someone had a question here. So they said, with all that you said, so are humans here for humans, or are we partially star children? But are most humans, let's kind of change it up a little bit. Are there any for humans? Are we for humans? Are we more so hybrids? Are we bastardized versions of our true selves? Well, what would you say?
I would say this. Consider, where would you put that dividing line between what is alien or extraterrestrial, or what is indigenous or native? If I came to this planet a million years ago. And my people have been here for a million years. Technically, sure, we came from somewhere else. We're extraterrestrial, but we've been here for a million years. So you're going to look at me as being indigenous or native to that planet or that country or that region. So the real question is, to answer that, is what do you consider indigenous versus extraterrestrial, and where do you put that thin red line between the two when they're both married to each other? Anyone who is indigenous came from somewhere else at some point, but they've been there for so long. We call them indigenous. They weren't always there, though. You got to go back quite far to find out where they came from. But if you've been there for a certain period of time, we start calling them indigenous. Well, they weren't always like that. So I do think that human beings are inherently starborn. We have that extraterrestrial gene running through us. It's the gene for passion, the passion of the Christ. That is a starborn legacy right there that was genetically injected into us because of that old Shakespearean phrase, I think, therefore I am. Without that gene for passion, we'd be walking around like drones and zombies, just obeying orders, pushing buttons, pulling levers, like a good obedient slaves. That was given to us as part of that spiritual revolution. So just because I call it a spiritual revolution doesn't take away from the genetic factor of extraterrestrial origin. But then I go and test you by saying, what's your definition of extraterrestrial and what's your definition of indigenous? They sleep in the same bed, so where do we draw the thin red line between the two?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so everyone, there's some things we have to do here at the center. I know you all are starting to send a lot of questions in and everything else. Let's see if we can just get one more here. One more so we can do what we have to do here. Now, of course, on tomorrow we do have, Richard will be here all afternoon. He'll be doing a lecture. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. We already know this. If you are enjoying this, and if you are in the Chicagoland area, there's one, maybe 2 tickets left, okay, for in-house. Of course, you could give us a call at 708-668-4909, and we can make that happen, okay? So, okay.
I'm all jazzed up. Let's do it now. No. Yeah. Can't wait to see everybody tomorrow. I'm going to enjoy meeting all of you for the first time. It's going to be awesome.
I agree 100%. So, you know what? We're gonna call this now. And so Richard could get some of his things done here. And so we appreciate all of you all. Hope you did enjoy today's session here. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Is any closing remarks, Rich?
That I would say we are all representative of official first contact. This is not something you just look at in the abstract sense. It's a living experience that every one of us on this planet has been leading up to for generations, for millennia, for eons. And eventually it was going to come back around to the realization that we have a starborn legacy. So the imminence of official first contact is coming. And we must realize that we are a key component to that. It's not something to sit back and watch on the sidelines like some WWE entertainment thing. It's something you're supposed to take part in and participate because it's in your bloodline. It's in your genes.
There it is. All right. So shout out to everyone. I look forward to seeing you soon, and take care.